Hey, what's up? How are you doing? Cool. I'm doing okay. Doing better because I'm about to chat books with you guys and I have grapes in my ears. It's a good day. It's gonna be a good day when you have grapes in your ears. How could it not be? We're quite close and personal, so I'm just going to start talking about all the books that I read in September. This month I mostly read pretty much all classics actually, which is really cool, really fun, and I honestly had a blast with all of them. So I think I'm just going to start with like the tiniest book up until the biggest book because that's fun. So one of the books that I read this month was Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I've only read 100 Years of Solitude. You guys know that is my favorite book of all time, and I have tons of other of his books on my shelves, like so many, but I've never read anything else from him, and so I finally picked up my second Garcia Marquez book, and that was this cute little one. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this was a gift from Linda, so thank you so much. I love this. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna love everything he ever writes. I was just very interested to see if his writing style, because he's someone that makes like tell not show work, if that makes sense. I think if you've read him, you know what I'm talking about, because at least in the two books of his I've read now, a lot of his style consists of telling you things. There's not a lot of dialogue. It's just a narrator telling you what's happening, like a sequence of events, but he writes so gorgeously that it for some reason works, and you feel all of the same things that like someone writing very provocatively, like showing you something rather than telling you something would. You get the same effect. Anyway, so Chronicle of a Death Foretold follows this man who is murdered. Like, we know from the start and from the title that he's going to be murdered, and we're set in this town where everyone kind of plays a part in his eventual death. There are so many circumstances and so many things, so many opportunities for his death to be avoided or evaded. If someone speaks up, if some little tiny coincidence or circumstance doesn't happen, why is he being murdered? Okay, so we have this woman who marries this man. The dude expects her never to have been with another man, and so when he finds out that she has been with another man, he is like, who? Who is it? Tell me his name. And so she says the name of this man, who is Santiago. And her brothers hear that she's been with Santiago. They're like, okay, we need to clear her honor, clear our family's name, because she has been returned. She's been returned like an object, essentially, like goods you bought from the market. He's like, here, I don't want this wife anymore. You can have your daughter, my wife, back. I don't want her anymore. And so her brothers determine that they're gonna kill Santiago for besmirching her honor. There's a ton of commentary on that though in the book, which I was really impressed with, and I just think it's so beautifully told. I love how like we only get ever a couple lines, or like 3 lines or 4 lines of dialogue from each character that so characterizes them and that are so like iconic that they become, I don't know, I just think it really works. I think it's a really interesting thing to only have your characters speak like 4 to 5 lines of dialogue in a whole novel, because then that's all you have of them. That's your only way of getting to know them through their vocabulary, through what they say, and I just think it's really effective. Anyway, I love this. Obviously nowhere near as much as I love 100 Years of Solitude, because this just not compare in scope or anything like that, but this is also set many years later from the point of view of Santiago's friend, who comes back to the town to get interviews because he's kind of investigating like what really happened, what really went on to end in the consequence of Santiago's murder. I also ask questions like who is really to blame for the murder, and it kind of implicates everyone, I guess. Everyone. Really good. Would highly recommend. I cannot wait to read more from him because I have so many good things to get to. So this was great. Recommend. It's an Emmy recommendation. Next, smallest one I have. This was also a gift, and that is Chess by Stefan Zweig. Zweig? I'm trying. This was amazing. So this one I gave 4 stars. This one is probably 4.5 or 5, honestly. I was expecting big things from this author, and I was not disappointed at all. I believe Chess, in this gorgeous Penguin Modern Classics edition, I think this was the last thing that he wrote that got published, because I believe he left for South America, and I think him and his wife committed suicide together, if I'm not mistaken. I want to read so much about his life because this is about World War II, among other things, but the basic premise is that we have this steamboat. There's a bunch of people on it, and word gets around that one of the people on this ship is a famous chess player. Like, he's the current world champion chess player, and everyone is like, oh my gosh, you know, it would be fun if we all played or got to play against the chess champion. Obviously, there's more than that, because as the people on board start to get beaten, this man who's also on the ship appears out of nowhere and is able to at least challenge or help them win against the world champion chess player. And everyone's like, who are you? What is your story? How are you able to do this? And we slowly learn this man's story. Like I said, this book has to do a lot with the Nazi takeover of Germany, and it uses chess to kind of illustrate that. It's a lot about like, how do you play chess against yourself? Is it possible to play the game against yourself? Like, can you? I mean, I've tried it. I feel like everyone who's played chess has tried to play both sides, like the white and the black side, but then you kind of like realize that it's not possible because you just end up second guessing yourself, tearing yourself apart. You already know what you're gonna do, and it's kind of like something that can definitely drive you a little bit crazy if you try to play chess against yourself. But it's used as an analogy for what Germany is doing to itself, a war against itself, exterminating itself. It's also a lot about the other side of torture. The Nazis were using that wasn't concentration camps. Like, what else were they doing for higher up officials or people they wanted information out of? And it was just so good. I had no idea what this book was going to be about aside from chess, but it really delves into deeper topics. I think his writing is fantastic. Like, it's so extraordinary. I did not want to put this down. I mean, you can fly through it. Also, look at the quote they chose for the back. Love it. For the pressure they intended to exert to get the material they needed out of us was to operate more subtly than through crude violence and physical torture. The method was the most exquisitely refined isolation. Nothing was done to us. We were simply placed in a complete void, and everyone knows that nothing on earth exerts such pressure on the human soul as a void. This was also my pick for Austria for my Around the World reading challenge. When Carolyn came to visit this month, I, for some reason, got a little bit enamored with Ernest Hemingway, mostly her doing because she loves Hemingway, and he is a classic author I have never ever read from, never touched. I don't know how I've avoided him throughout all my years of like schooling. He's never been on a syllabus. He's never been anywhere. Okay, I've never met Ernest Hemingway, never bumped into him in the library, never sat next to him in the bookstore. When Carolyn arrived, we went book shopping, and she found a really beautiful, I think it's a first edition copy of A Movable Feast, which is beautiful and stunning, and I read her copy while she was here because I just picked it up just to flick through it, and I got hooked. Something I've learned about Hemingway's writing is that it has this addictive quality. I'm not really sure. And like, now that I'm not reading any Hemingway at the moment, I'm missing it so much. Like, I really miss his writing. Hemingway famously writes very short sentences, very blunt, very to the point. There's absolutely no embezzling. I hope there's no embezzling. There's no lyricalness added to them. There's no flowers popping out of his sentences. That's just not a thing that happens. Everything is very sharp, very blunt, to the point. His writing has been called like athletic, and there is a ton of dialogue, but I just think it's such an interesting writing style. It's really not something I've come across. It's not something I've seen really replicated anywhere else in any author I've read, and so I read A Movable Feast first, which is more of like a kind of a non-fiction work. It's the author revisiting his days when he was living in Paris in the 20s, and so we have like anecdotes of him meeting F. Scott Fitzgerald for the first time, like trips they went on together. You have his little tea time days with Gertrude Stein, who really advised him, and like the whole circle of authors who were living and writing and working in Paris. At the time he was living in Paris with his wife. They were not very well off. Like, he hadn't written his first novel yet, and so they were very poor and just like struggling to get by and like living off of art almost. And it was just really charming. Like, it was so charming. And Hemingway's truth that he always says is like to just tell the truth, just tell a truthful story, like make it as realistic and full of truth and reality as possible, to like tell a straight tale, like just tell it straight. Adored A Movable Feast. Like I would highly recommend. I think as like my first Hemingway, it was really, really great because it also let me understand where he was coming from, where he was writing from. A lot of his novels that he writes are very personal to him because he does write from a truthful experience, and that's what he's always trying to capture. So that was really interesting, and I just think it's so cool that we have A Movable Feast, which is all about Paris and how much he loves Paris. 4 stars, really, really love that. And then I finished A Movable Feast, and I never ever do this with authors. Like in wrap-ups, you hardly ever see duplicate authors in a month because I just always feel like I just want to, you know, try as many different books as possible. But directly after A Movable Feast, I picked up The Sun Also Rises. This is one of the only Hemingway I have on my shelf. The other one is In Our Time, which is a collection of short stories, but I got this copy thrifted, I think years ago, and I never read it. And I picked this up, and I also really like this. I think as a lit student, it provides a lot of like strange barriers because so much of what you do as a lit student is like analyzing and looking for, you know, symbols and getting underneath a novel. But because Hemingway tries to write so truthfully, like write dialogue that he's either heard or that he knows is like so much a part of this period and the people walking around and like people that he does actually know in real life, it's really hard to get like underground in this novel because it's just so full of reality. And when you try to like look for things that are inserted into reality that are quite clever, like chess, what a chessboard symbolizes, and like the different meanings that a chessboard can take on in this novel, I feel like it doesn't really exist as fully in Hemingway because it's like, this is life. And when you try to like insert meaning into your life, it can go really poorly. I think what he's doing is like capturing a generation, capturing the feeling after the war of like what's going on, what life is like for these people. It starts with a quote from Gertrude Stein which says, "You are all a lost generation." And so that's really just what it's about. It is about the people of this time, and it's just so fascinating. This is my only, I guess, 100% fiction Hemingway that I've read, but it really does feel like a lot of his works are gonna read like nonfiction because he's trying so hard to have like truth as his main paramour, I guess. Anyway, I really like this, nowhere near as much as A Movable Feast, just because I feel like Hemingway's writing style really complements nonfiction, journal, diary entries, like anecdotes from his actual life. But I really enjoyed The Sun Also Rises. This is about our protagonist, who's this man named Jake, and he's back from the war. He's in love, he's in Paris, and then he's in Spain. And I don't really need to tell you the plot because it's just, it is what it is, if that makes sense. Really enjoyed this, 4 stars. So glad I read Hemingway, and I cannot wait to read more. The next one I read is The Blind Owl. The Blind Owl by Hidayat, if I'm saying that right. I think also a 5-star. Like, they're all kind of simmering into 5 stars, if that makes sense, you know? They're reaching a boiling point in my brain that I'm like, this is fantastic. This one I've spoken about pretty in length in a couple other videos recently, so I won't go too much into this other than just to tell you that it is gorgeous and maybe to read you the first sentence. This one's very disturbing, about a man who doesn't have a grasp on reality, let's put it there. Or maybe he does. Maybe he has a better grasp than the rest of us. The first sentence: in life, there are wounds that, like leprosy, silently scrape at and consume the soul in solitude. This one's really good at kind of, I guess, portraying what's going on. Will there be a day when someone discovers the secrets of these supernatural events? That reflection of the shadow of the soul that manifests itself between awakening and sleep, in a state of purgatory and unconsciousness. If now I have decided to write, it is only to introduce myself to my shadow, a bent shadow on the wall, and it is as if the more I write, it devours it with an even greater appetite. This book is about like, are you really who you are? Or like, as he says, am I a distinct and separate creature? Am I? It's about visions that, well, maybe they're not even visions. You know what? I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna let you interpret it for yourself. Also, I'll read you the grape quote because I'm wearing grapes. I would like to squeeze the entirety of my life like a bunch of grapes in my hand and to drip, drop by drop, its juice into the parched throat of my shadow. Just so brilliant, so brilliant. It's about a very sick man who experiences a lot of things and maybe hits on a lot of uncomfortable truths. So that is The Blind Owl. Also highly recommend. The last classic I read this month was Crooked House by Agatha Christie, and this was also a gift, so thank you so much. And then this was also a gift. What the hell, you guys? It seems like recently all the books I've been reading are just gifts from you all, which is incredible. So I read Crooked House in this gorgeous oh, there's a vulture. Wow. I also did a whole video about it, trying to solve Crooked House by myself, which I will leave up here, but I won't really talk too much about it. Essentially, Crooked House is about this family who all live in a little crooked house, and their patriarch, Aristide Leonidas, has been killed. But yeah, he's been killed. He has been killed, in fact, with his insulin bottle that's been switched out for poison. I really like this, 4 stars. Not my favorite Agatha Christie, because the ending to me was a little just off the rails, I feel like. And I think some clues were just, I don't know, I was unhappy with the way a few things turned out, more to do with like side characters and clues that were just kind of tossed in and then never revisited again. Like we never knew why certain things happened, namely with things that kind of cropped up at the beginning of the novel, if that makes sense. I don't want to spoil anything, but I still really liked it. So that is Crooked House. And then finally, I did read 2 more books in September, but I'm not going to talk about them here because I have a whole vlog coming, my unhinged romance reading vlog. So I read Throttled by Lauren Asher and Verity by Colleen Hoover. I'm not going to say too much, except I didn't really like either of them. So those are those 2, but definitely keep an eye open for that vlog because it goes into very much depth into each romance book. Throttled is an F1 romance. Ferrari does a lot better in Throttled than they're doing this season, I can tell you that. And Verity is like a mystery thriller romance. That is everything I read in the month of September. I'm gonna go now because my apartment is doing some sort of construction and it's driving me bonkers, and I'm sure you've been hearing it. And editing Emma is gonna have fun with that one. So thank you so much for watching. If you've read any of these or if you're planning to, let me know. As usual, now's the time. Start typing your favorite read of September down below because I may or may not hoard them, either for myself or for a video in the future. So just saying, you should put your data down below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for sending me any of these books if that was you. And until the next time, love you guys so much. Ciao.